Egypt. France's president there, day 2 of 3 of a visit by Emmanuel Macron, where he pledged further business ties, loans, and aid for the Egyptian economy. Macron also met in a tripartite summit with Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and the King of Jordan there ahead of his trip on Tuesday to the Sinai near the border with Gaza. Emmanuel Macron affirming his support for a peaceful resolution.
We are strongly opposed to the displacement of the population and to any annexation of Gaza or of the West Bank. It would be a violation of international law and a serious threat to the security of the entire region, including that of Israel. I also reiterate our full support for the Gaza reconstruction plan, which also opens the way to a new Palestinian governance of the enclave led by the Palestinian Authority. Hamas must have no part in this government and must no longer pose a threat to Israel.
And for more, let's cross to London and H.A. Hellyer, Senior Fellow at the Royal United Services Institute for Defense and Security Studies. Thank you for speaking with us here on France 24.
Thank you. My pleasure to be with you.
Emmanuel Macron's visit at a time when, note the contrast, Benjamin Netanyahu is at the White House. What were your thoughts listening to that clip of the French president just now?
Well, again, thank you for having me on your program. I think what's very clear is that Macron is representing a completely different view from what you see from DC right now when it comes to the quote-unquote Riviera plan. Unsurprisingly so, France has very close relationships with the governments of Egypt, of Lebanon, and elsewhere in the region. I think that it sees very clearly that the Riviera plan is very unpopular in the region for very obvious reasons. Egypt doesn't want to be complicit in ethnic cleansing. It sets a terrible precedent for the resolution of conflicts in the region. So there are quite a few good strategic as well as interest-based reasons for Macron to say, no, we don't agree with this particular approach when it comes to Gaza and Israel's war and occupation of Gaza.
We see figures like the French president step in this sort of very public diplomacy with the King of Jordan, with the President of Egypt. Usually it's when there's an interregnum in Washington, but right now there's no interregnum. Donald Trump's firmly in charge.
Well, he is firmly in charge, but I don't think that Middle East policy, when it comes to Donald Trump and the region, is, in any type of synergy. When it comes to, for example, Syria, the vast majority of the region, I think, is trying to give the authorities in Damascus a chance to make a go of it. Whereas when it comes to DC, there's still very little movement on sanctions being removed on Syria, which I think is really a precondition for any recovery of Syria. When it comes to Lebanon, of course, the Israelis have a very friendly, quote-unquote, regime in the United States with regards to its continual violation of the ceasefire agreement that was signed with Beirut. And of course, when it comes to Gaza and the West Bank, the policy of the United States officially is the Riviera plan, which is the removal or the migration, if we're trying to be very politically correct about it, of Palestinians from Gaza and then not returning and having the Strip turn into some sort of resort.
So when we see, on this point, when we see Emmanuel Macron in Egypt right now, is it just a photo op, or can it move the needle towards some kind of a lasting truce, at least in the Gaza Strip?
So let's be clear, Macron didn't go to Egypt, I think, primarily for the Gaza summit. That was at the end of the day. literally. Whereas when it came to the wider French-Egyptian relationship, there were different MOUs that were signed. There's a much wider strategic engagement with Cairo that isn't just about Gaza and the summit with the King of Jordan. There's wider issues there. When it comes to a ceasefire in Gaza, let's be clear, the only power that has the ability to make sure that the Israelis stop the war on Gaza is the United States. It's not the French, it's not the Egyptians, it's not the UK or the EU, it's the United States. And the United States has made it very clear that they stand shoulder to shoulder with Israel, to the point where it was reported in the last few hours that even on these killings of medics in Gaza, which has received widespread condemnation, I saw a report earlier today that indicated that the White House was giving the Israelis full support over this incident. So I think that the likelihood of there being a ceasefire is directly connected to the likelihood of the United States willing to put pressure on Tel Aviv, on the Israelis, to stop the war in Gaza. And right now, I don't see any indication of that.
H.A. Hellyer, your thoughts on, you bring it up, that bilateral relationship between France and Egypt, the French president there to sign deals to service Rafale fighter jets, also there with plans for the renovation of the Cairo metro, which is still under construction. Your thoughts on is France a force for good when it comes to the Arab world's most populous nation, or should they be hedging a little bit more when it comes to Abdel Fattah al-Sisi?
I mean, in this regard, you just have to look at French policy over the past 15 years. I don't think that there's any question that Paris has been continually developing its relationship with Cairo and sees it as a win-win. So I don't think that there's any indication that they're going to change in this regard. Sometimes there are conversations that are had about differing priorities in the region, but generally speaking, I think Macron and Sisi are on the same page about many of the files. You see the body language in these scenes that are on the screens right now. You see it in the communiques that are publicized. I mean, this is a relationship that isn't particularly rocky at all. When it comes to Cairo and Paris, I think it's a very strong relationship and one that has been enduring for quite some time. And certainly given the other files that are on the table right now, Syria, Lebanon, Gaza, I think that there's a lot for them to talk about, and they have been talking about it. And I haven't seen evidence of friction in that regard for quite some time.
Because Egyptians from the diaspora, some of them that we've spoken to, say they would like to hear a little bit more about human rights, which, as you were saying, is not what's on the agenda.
No, it isn't, and hasn't been for a long time. So this is what I mean when I say, if you look at how Paris has engaged with Cairo over more than a decade. I mean, I think you can date this back at least 10, 15 years. There have been certain times where Paris has raised an issue here or there, and sometimes about particular individuals as well. But generally speaking, the prioritization of Paris has been about Egypt's role in the region, their assessment of whether or not Egypt is sustainable in this current format. And so far, it's been very clear that Paris has decided, no, this is a government that has staying power. This is a government that is not going anywhere. And we have issues of mutual interest that we want to discuss and that we want to develop. And I think this is why you see the scenes taking place today in Cairo with Macron and Sisi. They went to Khan Khalili, which is, Cairo's old market. It was a very how should we say, a very warm affair, and one that was publicized, I think across social media as well. You see this press conference that happened earlier today. The relationship is quite a good one, and I don't think that's changing anytime soon.
One quick final question for you, H.A. Hellyer. Your thoughts on Tuesday's visit by Emmanuel Macron to the Sinai Desert near the border with Gaza. What are you expecting from that?
I expect Macron to say there what he's pretty much said elsewhere, which is, a call for a return to ceasefire, a recognition that this situation is intolerable. I'm paraphrasing here. I don't think he's used those particular words, but I think France has been quite clear in this regard, at least, when it comes to Israel's war on Gaza, and to repeat that there's, no room for the idea of expulsion of Palestinians. And let's be clear, when the Israelis talk about voluntary migration, there's nothing voluntary about migration from an uninhabitable piece of land. When it's made uninhabitable, when you leave, even if you're not literally forced out by a gun, and very often it will be like that, it's still involuntary because it's uninhabitable. So it's down to making the conditions conducive for people to actually have a real choice. So I think he may not say that in particular. He may not talk about the idea of voluntary migration being a contradiction in terms when it comes to Gaza, but I think that he will simply reaffirm France's support for the quote-unquote the Arab plan, which of course is very much an Egyptian plan, and to proceed along the lines of, we need to come back to a ceasefire, we need to respect international norms. I expect a lot of that. I don't expect anything new in that regard. I think it'll be a powerful statement because it'll be a visual, right? It'll be Emmanuel Macron on the border with Gaza, on the border with Gaza, in Rafah, very close to where the fighting is actually taking place across the border. And I think that'll be an important visual. But I don't expect him to say anything that will be tremendously different.
H.A. Hellyer, so many thanks for speaking with us from London.
Thank you.